Hey, welcome back to Q&A. We're finally back into a routine now that we've moved and I'm settled into my office here at home. And my apologies, it took a little bit longer than I'd anticipated. I had thought that I could set up in my office in the city, but it just didn't pan out. So my apologies for the long hiatus, but we're back into it now. We are going to catch up on questions over the next few weeks. So let's jump straight into today's question. You mentioned recently you aren't bothered by the outcome of the upcoming election. As Christians, shouldn't we be? It's a great question. Let me just answer this in two parts. Let me just answer your question about shouldn't we be concerned, and then gets to what I said. Should we be concerned about the outcome of the election? Yes and no. The reason I say that is that we need to remember that in Romans 13 verse 1 that we read that there's no government authorities appointed except that which God has established. That means that our vote is actually participating in the plans and purposes of God, and we should trust Him with the outcomes. It concerns me that as Christians, so often we hold strong views, and there's nothing wrong with that. But we need to recognize that there are people who will hold contrary views as equally passionately as we hold ours, and would justify them biblically as well. And so we need to recognize that we may get an outcome that we like, but we need to ensure that we don't then burn bridges towards those who wanted a different outcome. We need to recognize that the outcome is ultimately God's and trust Him. And if the outcome that eventuates isn't the one we want, then that's okay. We don't get bent out of shape. We still maintain deepening relationships with our brothers and sisters who share contrary political views to ours, because at the end of the day, that's all they are, political views. And that's in part why I made the comment that I'm not bothered by the outcome, because it concerns me that increasingly what's happening, and this was the point that I was making, is that we're equating our faith with our political views, and it's a dangerous place to be. We should never equate Christianity with a particular political view, with a particular position or party. I want to be very clear that first and foremost, we are citizens of heaven before we are citizens of New Zealand. And that means that how we view things should always be shaped by that. How we view a party's policies, how we think about which party deserves our vote, which one doesn't, should not be shaped by ideological or political or philosophical grounds, but it should always be shaped theologically. What is in keeping with the plans and purposes of God? What's more in line with God's creation mandate than anything else, because no political party lines up out of the box with the kingdom of heaven. Across the political spectrum here in New Zealand, all of them have voted for things which are an anathema to God, for end of life, for abortion, late-term abortion, for all of those sorts of things, for gender fluidity, calling good evil and evil good. So we need to recognize that right out of the box, that we cannot equate our political views with a political position, our Christian views, with a political position, because they just don't line up. That's why for me, when I evaluate as a citizen of heaven before I'm a citizen of New Zealand, it's not for me about left or right. It's about which party is going to bring us closer towards the plans and purposes God has for people. So what parties' justice policies, what parties' economic policies, what parties' social policies are more representative and more in keeping with the kingdom of heaven than another. Because currently we live in a country where politically, regardless of which side of the political spectrum you favour, we play one group of people off against another. We play one ethnic group off against another. We play one socioeconomic group off against another. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's just, and it's not biblical. We are our brother's keeper, so we need to look after the poor, but we also need to honour those who have the ability and the drive to work to prosper. If it takes a village to raise a child, then it takes the entire political spectrum to make a good country, in my view, because how can we look after the poor if we don't have people who are encouraged and motivated to earn They're the ones who pay tax. Where does the money come from to look after the poor? So I think for me, it's about what's equitable, what is just, what is fair. How do we care for the whole of society, not just for particular groups, depending on our ideological or philosophical, political positions? In fact, in Jeremiah 29, verse 7, he writes that they should pray for the city because in its welfare lies their own. And of course, the city he's referring to is Babylon, and the God's people have been taken off into captivity into Babylon. And Babylon in the Bible represents everything that is the opposite of God and his values and his kingdom. It was hostile to that. And so today, Babylon sort of represents the world that is opposed to God's values, God's standards, God's morality, God's moral compass. And so to not engage is to support the status quo. And so I would never advocate not being engaged. The point I was making was that we engage, but we engage from a biblical perspective, not from a political perspective. And in fact, political participation is one way, in my view, of pursuing the common good of God's creation purposes, of caring for one another and creating a just and fair society where people can flourish irrespective of their abilities, where they're honoured and cared for because they're image bearers of the Most High. And so therefore we don't, as I say, play one group off against another, but we look at ways of leveraging the strengths of one group to help another, so that we can all gain. So that's what I meant by I'm not bothered, but we should be engaged. I agree, and fair point for calling me. I appreciate you calling me out. I was a little bit flippant and in order to make a point, and I shouldn't have been. My apologies. So I hope that brings some clarity for you. Certainly interesting times ahead as we run up to the election in about 4 weeks' time, I think it is. So yeah, anyway, that's it for now. If you've got questions on faith and life, you can ask them on slido.com. Use the hashtag ALC23. We'll love to hear from you. But until next time, God bless.